All right, you are live.
We are live. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 12th, 2025 regular meeting of the Financial Advisory Commission. We have all commission members present except for Peter Vale, who emailed me and said he's going to be a few minutes late. Want to thank Jim for taking over for me last month when I was overseas, having supposedly a little bit of fun for a couple weeks, and I understand got a relatively productive meeting. We may cover a little bit of the same territory. Jim and I have talked. I have a general understanding about what you all covered last month, but there are a couple of things that I need to follow up on. So, with respect to the agenda, before we have a motion to approve it, I'd like to request an amendment to the agenda in Roman numeral 5, unfinished business. I want to add item C, debt affordability. I don't know how much we'll do on that, if anything, today, but I do want to have it on the agenda. Is there any objection to adding that to the agenda? Hearing none.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
can I have a friendly amendment to strike the Finance Department report from 4A? Oh, no, Jody's here. I'm sorry, because I know Brittany was going to be out.
Yeah.
All right, forgive me. I will withdraw.
Yeah, okay. So, subject to my amendment, are there any other revision corrections about the agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as revised. Motion made by, looks like Frank Brown has his hand up.
Second.
Second, everybody raised at the same time. Everybody wants to second the agenda. So why don't we say Joe Rubino seconded it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye or raising the right hand.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimously passed. Thank you very much. Kat was kind enough to send us minutes for the May 8th, 2025 meeting. Have you had an opportunity to review them? If so, are there any revisions, corrections, or questions? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve the May 8th, 2025 meeting minutes.
Move.
Who's that?
Joe.
Okay, motion by Mr. Rubino, seconded by Mr.
Frank
Brown. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Unanimously approved. Okay, reports. Finance Department, I know that Brittany is out of town at a conference. Jody, do you have anything from the Finance Department?
So I'll tell you what I know. I'm not privy to everything now because Brittany's pretty much handling a lot of the higher level stuff. Vicky may be helpful in this regard. They're wrapping, as you know, the budget has been fully approved and
Wait, which project?
what
What project?
the budget.
Oh, budget.
Yeah, the budget has been fully approved. So we'll be working on getting that loaded up into the system, and a lot of our focus has been on the changeover from this fiscal year to the next, which is coming up at the end of this month. We also are talking to the council about the fourth quarter transfer. They took it to the finance committee a day or two ago, and they approved the fourth quarter transfer. That's when we shift the budget around to meet any needs that were unanticipated during the year. Try to shift some budget around so we can keep people within their budget allowances. So that is through Finance Committee, but it has to go to council on their last meeting in June, which is this coming up Monday. Other than that, it's full speed ahead for the year-end process. Vicky, I don't know if you want to add anything else. Vicky meets with Brittany on a regular basis on other matters, so.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add is that in addition to all of the budget stuff, which as you can appreciate is it's a lot of work in and of itself. In addition to that, Department of Finance and IT and our Central Services Department have been working on several different initiatives that are more kind of frontline operational things, and the few of them sort of things that Jody worked on getting in motion and finally kind of coming to fruition. So getting ready to turn on more electronic payments and some other things like that are a little bit more behind the scenes, but really help with the operations both inside finance and across the city. So very much looking forward to that stuff. Like I said, a bunch of stuff that Jody had started now coming to fruition. So
Okay, great. Thank you, Vicky.
mhm.
Any questions of Jody? Vicky? Well, that was,
Is is there also a physical move of the finance department, Jody?
There will be, yes. There's Central Services has been working on getting the Shaw Street location up and ready. They're working on the roof right now, I believe, but they will end up relocating once that location is ready. You are correct.
okay, any other questions? Seeing none, welcome, Jackie. Nice to have you. Get to you in a minute. Okay, Madam City Manager, anything more from you, from the City Manager's office?
The main thing just for this group's awareness is I'm actually going to be out for the next month. Today's my last day before a medical procedure. And Jackie will be acting while I'm out. So she'll be doing triple duty during that time. So at any rate, it's sort of fortuitous in some ways that she's here so that you guys just get to meet her and stuff like that. But at any rate, that's sort of the main thing, is just getting ready for me to be out for this period of time. So
All right, thank you, Vicky. Welcome, Peter. Nice to have you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Okay, moving right along. Anything, Jim, from the audit committee this month?
The audit committee meeting last month did not occur due to lack of quorum.
Okay. Unfinished business. I understand there was a little bit of either questioning, discussion, or otherwise the last meeting about Resilience Authority annual finance report. Jim asked me to put it on the agenda, and I have. And we're fortunate to have Jackie Guild with us. Jackie is responsible, I think, for the Resilience Authority on behalf of the city of Annapolis. And I see that we have received from Jackie through Vicky a link to a website and reporting information for the Resilience Authority. And I just received it yesterday, I believe, and I sent it out to you all this morning. So I don't expect that you will have had an opportunity to review it, but Jackie could, because I think this is relatively new to everybody. I remember we talked about Resilience Authority when it was in the formative stages, and provided some input at that point. But I don't know that we've talked about it at all since it came to fruition. So would you just give us a couple minutes about what the Resilience Authority is and the reports, the annual reports that you provided to us?
Okay, so the Resilience Authority, as you know, was enacted by the General Assembly. Well, the ability to create resilience authorities in Maryland by the General Assembly in 2020, and then enabling legislation was passed by the city and the county the following year, and the Resilience Authority actually was established in 2022, June 30th, 2022. I provided the link to the website for the Resilience Authority for the first 2 years of reports, which would be fiscal year 23 and 24. Initially, the Resilience Authority was on a calendar year, but then they realized that their report would be due on January 1st, the day after the end of the calendar year, and that wasn't feasible to produce. And so they synced with the city and the county and got on the same fiscal year of July 1st through June 30th. So so you have the first and the second year of active management of the Resilience Authority, FY23 and 24. Usually they produce their annual report by the end of each year. So you will get FY25 at the end of this year, either at the very end of December or very beginning of January of 26. And it's a joint report of their financial status and their work to date. So you have their work and financials all in one report, the work first, followed by the financial statement. So the first year, there was a lot of activity centered around establishing the authority's administrative functions. We started out without a direct executive director. The board was running the Resilience Authority and establishing some of the rules and administrative functions. And then the first director came on board. He subsequently hired, now they have a director of operations and a director of programs, and they have an intern, a year-long intern right now. That's the current staff. So they did a lot of administrative functions in the beginning and then started seeking grants. Now they're supposed to be able to levy fees, bonds. A big part of the Resilience Authority is to go after private investments towards infrastructure projects that will mitigate and prevent climate change in both the city and the county. And this was the first multi-jurisdictional Resilience Authority in the U.S. So our enabling legislation allowed us to combine as many jurisdictions as you wanted into Resilience Authority, and it made a lot of sense to do Anne Arundel County and the city of Annapolis together. So in the first year, they started pursuing a lot of grants. They still do pursue mostly grants for funding. This year, I know the director is branching out, looking for other private investments like P3 kind of arrangements for funding activities. It works really well for the city because the Resilience Authority is very nimble. It doesn't have as many steps to go through for procurement and et cetera, for us to pursue funding sources. And they act as an extension almost of the staff of the city and the county as far as grant seeking, grant administration, grant writing, and then other opportunities, communications, public engagement, et cetera. And they've done about $35 million worth of projects so far in both the city and the county. Everything from gray infrastructure to green infrastructure projects, dealing with stormwater, flooding, increased precipitation, energy, building energy, fleet, EV electrification of fleet and infrastructure to support it. It's kind of all across the spectrum of climate change mitigation projects. So that's the Resilience Authority in a nutshell and what they've been doing. If you want more detail, I'm happy to provide it.
Let me ask this, Jackie. How is it determined, and who determines how much money in terms of debt or PAYGO the city of Annapolis contribute to the Resilience Authority each year?
Well, I don't think there's a set formula for how much the jurisdictions contribute. The county, the first year, provided a $500,000 unrestricted type of, called it a grant. The city did not do the same thing. And then sometimes when we have money towards something that we would like to do, and but we would like the Resilience Authority to administer that program. For example, I was recently provided by City Council with funds to establish a financial assistance transition program for the gas-powered leaf blower ban, and needed to establish either a voucher or a rebate system for that program. We decided that it might be because of lack of staffing on our part, and then the multiple different departments that would need to be involved, the contracts that would have to be worked out with our Office of Law, and then the budgeting through the Department of Finance. We decided it might be easier to do this through the Resilience Authority because they're much more nimble and they can do these projects without so many steps along the way. So because it wasn't an infrastructure project, in the end, we decided to have Council Fire, who works with the Resilience Authority, do the work in developing our financial assistance transition program. And it's probably going to be awarded to a different third-party contractor in the end, but they did the initial research for us, how it should be set up, et cetera. And to do that work, the city transferred money to the Resilience Authority to allow them to do that work. And we have an MOU that allows us to do that with the Resilience Authority, so we can transfer funds that we get through grants or through money that's allocated to a specific department, in this case, the city manager's office, to execute a program. We can transfer that money per the MOU over to the Resilience Authority for them to use it for that purpose. And that's how the city's been transferring funds.
Questions, either generally about Resilience Authority or specifically about what Jackie has told us. And I don't expect that many, if any of you, have actually looked at the reports from the link. So we can deal with that another time if you want.
Yeah, and I'm happy to come back another time and speak to you, about questions you have about the reports, or we can even have someone from the Resilience Authority join you if you have a lot of questions.
Great, thank you very much, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Hey, before you go, question. Jackie, with regards to the $35 million in projects that have been funded, when they're completed, who then takes ownership of those improvements, or like, for example, the EV fleet?
So that the EV fleet project, which is a county project, that those vehicles are the property of the county.
Okay. So the projects that were completed on behalf of the city of Annapolis become the city's improvements?
Yes, they do. And the city, for example, if we're doing a restoration project for which we can get credits towards our MS4 program, which is our impervious surface stormwater treatment program, the city would get those credits towards our permit.
Thanks. Does the city get input on the decision as to the prioritization of projects for the upcoming year?
Yes. So the board of directors, there's 9 members of the board of directors. 6 are from the county, 3 are from the city. It was done that way based on populations, not even because the city, if we really did it based on true population, the city would have even less representation, but that's how it was set up. And so those board members help set the priorities for the projects. Now, some of the projects, like, for example, the city and the county, in partnership with many nonprofits in the area, applied for a DNR state grant, a whole watershed grant. The Resilience Authority took the lead in corralling all of us and all our ideas and our input and submitting the application as the Resilience Authority for the city and the county. And we were successful. We were awarded the urban grant for that program. There's only 5 grants that were awarded. $2 million definitely is coming to the city and county for projects, and there can be more money into the millions over a period of 5 years. In order to determine, we submitted probably close to $45 million in potential projects between the city and the county, but only several are selected, like 10 of those are selected for the first year. How those are prioritized is not up to the Board of Directors of the Resilience Authority, because the state, MDE, Maryland Department of the Environment, and Department of Natural Resources are negotiating those priority projects for the first year with the Resilience Authority. So most for priority project setting, what the Resilience Authority will go after, and overall, that's done by the Board of Directors in conjunction with the staff of the Resilience Authority. But some of the grants, when the grants are actually awarded, it's between the administering agencies and the Resilience Authority on how, if there's a number of projects, how those are prioritized.
Thank you.
Peter, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, Jackie. Hi, Jackie. I was wondering, I see that you got a $500,000 grant from the county. Are there any commitments that you're desiring on a long-term basis from the city in terms of funding the Resilience Authority?
We could, I mean, so far it's working out well without actually asking for more money from the city at this point, as long as we can continue under our memorandum of understanding to shift funds to the Resilience Authority for them to administer programs. That helps us quite a bit from staff capability side of things. And there may be a point, I will say, where the Resilience Authority will come to the city and ask us for funding to do projects. Now, we recently approved in our last, I mean, we did this in the last budget, actually, in our FY26 budget, which we just passed. There's $100,000 approved for a West Street transit study. That is something that we will shift to the Resilience Authority because we're looking at between the city and the county at combined transit around perhaps a streetcar system at the center of it. So we're going to do a feasibility study with the Resilience Authority as the lead. So that is city money, which we will be shifting over there. And that's how we're doing it right now. So that kind of it meets like what the county did initially was a $500,000 seed kind of grant to get them started so we can start hiring staff, et cetera. The city did not contribute towards that, but we are contributing now. So to answer your question, we are contributing, and as long as that continues, that will work well for us.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Jackie on the Resilience Authority? Hearing none, I'm going to ask you all to do me a favor, and that is that review the materials. It won't take you long, and within the next 2 weeks, send me any questions or let me know if you think it would be helpful to have Jackie and or a representative of the Resilience Authority at our next meeting to talk about this further. If I don't hear from you all within the next couple of weeks, I'll assume that you understand the reports that have been submitted and you don't have any further questions or comments at this time for Jackie or for anyone from the Resilience Authority. That's fair enough? Any questions?
Yeah. There's one other one I want to highlight for you that's important to the city that the city obtained through the Resilience Authority as the lead on a grant application, a $800,000 grant for the Annapolis Maritime Resilience Initiative. It's really not maritime. It's more about stormwater control and flooding and climate change impacts. So that's another example of the Resilience Authority putting together the grant application with the city's assistance, but it was quite a bear of an application. And that's looking at basically the Spa Creek and mostly the Back Creek watershed in the Eastport Peninsula and the vulnerabilities that are posed there by climate change and identifying where actions need to be addressed. And the second part of that will be then applying for funding to implement engineering solutions, which will be in the millions of dollars to address those types of climate change impacts to those areas of the city.
Any questions on Jackie's follow-up? Hearing,
Ross.
yes, Ross.
I have in my hand, actually on the floor, the monthly report we get from Jackie on the resilience and sustainability highlights, which is multiple pages and chock full of information. Jackie, I wonder if you shouldn't send that along to the FAC too, to give them a more full sense of how robust our resiliency activities are.
I'm happy to do that. And that, just so the group knows, that is just, that's not the Resilience Authority's work, although there's a lot of overlap because I work very closely with the Resilience Authority. That's the work that's done by myself and my staff, and also in conjunction with other departments throughout the city on projects that are resilience, sustainability, climate change, environmentally oriented. So it's a comprehensive summary of everything we're up to right now. It's it's in fairly big font, although it's almost 15 pages long. It's everything from stormwater control to energy, building energy efficiencies, EV fleet, pollinator park at the solar park. It runs the whole gamut of everything you can think that's environmental. But I'll be happy to send that along.
Thanks. Jackie?
If
Yes.
at any point you feel like there's some information or material you'd like to send to the FAC, send it to me or to Kat, and we'll
Okay.
make sure that it gets distributed. Ross, thanks for bringing that up. Other comments, questions? Jim?
Sorry, thanks. Jackie, these financial reports that come out every year, do you use them at all?
From the Resilience Authority?
Yeah.
I don't need to use them. I mean, I look at them just to see that they line up and how much we're actually spending through the Resilience Authority. I guess they're useful to me in the fact that I can show the utility of the Resilience Authority and our relationship with them to council and to support the projects that I work on.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, last call. Other comments, questions? No, Jackie, thank you very, very much for joining us. Nice to see you.
You
And
too.
we'll see you again sometime.
Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
You're welcome to stay or you can leave. I guess you left. Okay. Moving right along. Spending affordability ordinance 12-25 first reader. Alderman Barnett, thank you very much for spearheading this and bringing it as far as it's come. From my understanding is that there was a discussion about this at the last meeting that where I was not present, so didn't have an opportunity to hear the discussion. So there may be a little bit of overlap here. Also, my understanding that the FAC has not taken a position on this legislation yet, and I hope that we can do that today. So before I open it up to the floor, I'd just like to express some concerns that I have, Alderman, about the ordinance, and that is one of timing. I see that in the staff report, the staff raises issue as well. I'm concerned that the ordinance would take effect July 1, 2025 if adopted, and there are certain time frames within which various reports have to be prepared and submitted to different people by the FAC. And before that can happen, there needs to be money budgeted for consultants and other financial expenses of the FAC to fulfill this responsibility. Needs to be an RFP prepared for consultant services, a procurement process, establishment of a relationship with consultant do the work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't see any way that all can be accomplished by insufficient time for the FAC to prepare and submit a report to the mayor and council by October 1st, as specified in the legislation. So that is my basic concern, one of timing. I think in my original comment to you and my supplemental comments, I suggested pushing the first report of the fact off a year to be able to accomplish this in a timely manner without to accomplish this in a timely manner. So let me ask you for your thoughts on that. Because I endorse what you're trying to accomplish. I just want to make sure that it's done properly and without undue rushing. And if there's time to go through, the entire process of the multiple layers of people who are going to be involved in it. So.
Right. So, first of all, I wish timing were our biggest issue, but I don't think that it is, but I'll get to that. I think you're talking about a section of the code on page 2 of 5 in the legislation on the reports required. This effort started really right around the same time that the fact was established under the Cohen administration, when we had some financial difficulties for the city. And the fact took it up in earnest when Bob Burden and Ed Meehan, it was about 2021, I believe, and did some rigorous analysis. The fact sent a letter supporting this at that time period. It languished, and then we had in 24 a reaffirmation of the fact support for the need for this. We had testimony, and Ms. Dickinson is here from the Finance Committee, that Finance Department, that would be helpful to have external economic longer term forecasts for consideration. And that's what this is about, is informing the Finance Department and the fact and the council and the Finance Committee, et cetera, about what the long-term outlook is. Jim Cardillo has often pointed out that we really need to be, when we're passing legislation and funding things, we need to look at the long tail of it. And so something that in a current year might be relatively small expenditure can balloon into bigger expenditures or growing, continuing expenditures. So that's the underpinnings for this. At one of the more recent meetings, Ms. Dickinson, and I don't remember whether Mr. Trudeau was on that or not, reported a conversation with one of the potential vendors that I was disappointed in that they didn't think they could do much more for us than what they already do for the state and the county, which I believe is still something. But the difference between us and, let's say, the county is the composition of our revenue. Ours is much more heavily dependent on real estate. There is a problem in budgeting recently with the volatility of the next biggest source, which is the income tax, which I'm not sure we really understand why we're getting that volatility, but I would think that this kind of a service would help us. So that's the status is that this has been introduced on first reader. It has had its public hearing. It is now coming to the Finance Committee and the Economic Matters Committee and to the Financial Advisory Commission. I'm not sure when this is going to be coming up, or even if it has come up before either of those two council committees, but today is the day, and for however many other days that it gets the review by the FAC. Now, to your specific question, if I'm correct that you're talking about the October 1st reporting level, I think that's something that can be addressed in committee and nailed down. And I think it's something that really would want to have some discussion by the Finance Department. The notion was to get this information to the finance department in advance of the commencement of their annual budget exercise. It does not have to be October 1st. The budget exercise is, and Jody can speak to it again, fairly nascent in October. I think it gets more into full-fledged in November and especially December. But I'd leave that to her advice on this. So that's something that can be addressed in terms of the that October date and be worked out in committee. What I'm really hoping to do before I leave the council is to get this in place. And I think that the timing in those issues, even after the legislation is passed, are things that are going to have to be worked out. We have a schedule for when we have the ACFR that is supposed to be delivered every year, and we regularly can't make that. And I suspect that that could be the same thing here, but at least it tries to put a stake in the ground. This would be a good time for us to have this information as we start to look at the next year's budget. But more importantly, I think to me, and I think to the fact, is out year potential consequences. We may fund a big effort in the fiscal 27 that actually has some consequences in 28 or 29. And there may be some notion from the economic people that tariffs or the national debt burden or other things may kick in. And that's the kind of thing, I listen to Bloomberg on the radio every day. That's the kind of thing that the economists are talking about right now, and I think are going to have some important impacts on us down the road, and we ought to be aware of it. And so that's really the fundamental intent here. The specifics, we can work out the details as we go along.
Thank you, Alderman. Comments, questions about either my or Alderman Arnett's comments, and your thoughts generally on the legislation and what position, if any, the fact should take on it. So first, Jim, then Frank, and then whoever else wants to talk. So
Thanks,
Jim.
Fred. Thank you, Ross. Question for you. I know that legislation shouldn't be dependent upon a certain consultant, but are there resources available in the state of Maryland to provide this service?
Well, Maryland and the county both contract with an organization that's headquartered out of Towson. After we got the information that they were not feeling, first of all, and that was very inexpensive, and we may even be able to just piggyback on the county for that. I started doing some research. There are several other groups, Touche Deloitte. I have a list, and I've been calling them to talk to them about what kinds of services. There's a KPMG. There are a number of organizations. Now, the really big ones really have a big fee, and so I'm doing some research to see who's out there and what they might want to charge for this. It does strike me as being very desirable to be using a consistent forecaster across the whole vertical integration at the state level, at the county level, and at the city level, because we are in the county and in the state. But it also may be advisable or desirable to get more than one opinion. If we can piggyback on the county and do our own reassessment of what there is real estate in the county, and they are assessing those kinds of things. If we can piggyback on that and get a second vendor, I think that's actually a desirable outcome. Right now, I don't know that we know. I've talked with Jake Trudeau about this off and on. We've been a little bit busy with the budget, but he's pretty enthusiastic about this. And I think we've sort of said, let's recover from the budget And maybe we can talk about this in the fall. I think nothing can actually happen unless we have this established in legislation. So seeking vendors and vetting out budget amounts and things like that. In terms of the budget itself, I think there's two different kinds of budget considerations here. One is the actual budget to acquire the service. And it's always been my sense, and again, I'll ask the director emeritus to speak to this, that the city would be paying for the forecasting services. Another kind of funding that the FAC may want to ask for is their own help to look at the results of the forecasting services and inform them. I don't know that there are any economists on the FAC. Frank, I don't know what your degree is, but I am an economist and I feel comfortable, and I actually did a lot of economic forecasting in my career. But it is economists speak, and it probably could use some help in translating it. So I think that capability is in the legislation, but it's to be determined.
Thank you.
Other questions, Jim?
No, I'm enthused by Alderman Arnett's initiative. So I'm encouraged. So there are sufficient funds allocated in the FY26 budget to accomplish this.
There are no funds that I know of that are in the budget. I think that the notion was that this is something that is going to be in the vendor said, I think, and again, Jody, please help me with that, it would be a couple $1,000s. I think if it's as much as $25,000, that's something that we can find out of the contingency funds, some money, or reappropriate from other things. But we can't really shop until we have the authority. So what I'm doing is strictly on my own as an individual, not even as alderman, but as somebody who is an economist and is somebody that's enthusiastic about this. I can't tell you what the cost would be. I can't tell you what who you might want to go to if you want some supplementary expertise for the fact and what that would cost. I do know of a couple of small vendors that I've used in my professional career that could be useful. In fact, one of them is a former member of the FAC, Joe Cater, that might be able to help us with this, even just help us with looking at who we might want to consider for the forecast vendor and who we might want to consider for any kind of economic interpretation of the forecast. By the way, the forecast is really, from Towson at least, is a consortium of 5 different forecasts that are put together by Towson into a consensus forecast. They tend to be fairly conservative, which warms my heart. But there are 5 different forecasts that the FAC could want to look at and consider. Wonder why they think this is so low, or they think this is so high. So there is some expectation that there will be value added by the FAC in parsing out what the forecasts are telling us. And then there is the other corollary here that I hope gets developed, which is this is looking at revenue growth and potential revenue sources. Mr. Cardillo has often pointed out we really ought to be looking on the spending side. They are corollaries. I'm a T account fan, so we want to fill in both sides of the account. And I have a hope that as this matures as a process, that we really will be looking at the economic forecast as they impact both expected revenues and also impact on cost of doing business.
Thank you.
My usual short answer.
No, thank you.
Frank?
Yes, sir. You may have answered my question in your last response, but just to clarify what I thought I heard. The original question was the chairman's concerns about meeting the deadline to provide the resources to get the reports and things that we're requesting. And if I understood, Ross, what you replied was that there is some wiggle room in there where funds could be acquired to accomplish those things. Is that correct?
That's my sense. That will have to be determined by the finance department and the city council finance committee. If it's a couple of $1,000s or even $10,000, I think those kinds of funds are easily defined. If it's getting more into the $50,000 range, that may delay I mean, we can't do any procurement until we have the legislative authority to do this. And so it didn't get done in time, to my great frustration, but I'll own some of the delay. We didn't get it in time to be a consideration in the fiscal 26 budget. This is an investment in the future. I hope there's a long future for the fact and a long future for the city of Annapolis, and that we'll have time to get this all in place.
Thank you. I agree with what you said, and I agree with this legislation. I just wanted to make sure that, as the chairman said, we're not getting into a position where we can't do what we need because we don't have the resources that we need.
We're not,
Thank you.
Simon Legree, we're not cruel and saying, hey,
Oh.
your rent is due or we're kicking you off the property.
Well, no, but when you need something and it's not available,
Yeah.
it still doesn't help.
It hasn't been available to us for 200 and some odd years, whatever the tenure of the city government is. I'd just like to get it available. And, my fond hope now is available for consideration in fiscal 27. And who knows where I'll be? I might be over in Europe where Fred just came back from.
Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the enabling legislation is important to keep this moving forward. But yeah, I don't quite have my head around the timing issue of whether this is an impact FY27 recommendations or FY28. I'm always a little anxious if there's no money allocated. And to get the kind of report we're looking for, in my experience is you have the economists will give you a worst case, the best case, and a most likely, and then the organization does kind of a sensitivity analysis and a risk tolerance, and that'll take a little bit of time. I suspect a sound report, it might not be extraordinarily expensive, but it won't. I think if it's cheap, we get it probably cheap too. So I'm just I don't quite have my head around whether this is something that we'll pull off by next October or whether we look a year down the road. I think that's how Fred kind of introduced this dialogue. And I'm all for moving forward. And I think we have to keep this dialogue to see where that zone ends up. But so I definitely support the legislation. I support going down this road. Just don't quite have my head around the next financial steps. Over.
Yeah. And that the fact will presumably make a report. That report will be available to both Economic Matters and Finance committees. I will be attending both of those to present as I am today. And again, these things can also be amended. I think the important thing is to get the initiative started. If we get the legislation passed and we start to do procurements and we find out, for example, that the vendor that we want can't deliver something until January, then we're going to have to go back and amend the legislation. Those things are fairly fluid and easy to do, even if we pay attention to it. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that go into code that, that was the goal, but we couldn't quite get there. And I mentioned the ACFR as one of those things. There's many, many others. So I guess my feeling is I wouldn't get too hung up on that date. If it doesn't work, we change it to what does work. But the bigger issue is getting the authority to do this.
Other questions? Ed, good morning.
Thanks. So it's good to see that we are at this stage, and hopefully we'll be moving forward and making this all reality. And on that score, So we need to implement this in, practical ways. And in that regard, we're going to need to do this identification of who is going to provide the economic analysis. And I would say to Alderman Arnett, I was trained as an economist, although I've gone the legal career, but I do have a little bit of memory of some of that. So, but we'll see what we can accomplish together. But we're going to need, an RFP to go out to identify who's going to work on this. And, I know in the package that we got for the meeting today, there was some correspondence, from the, city manager going back into May 5 about staffing. So one practical question I've got is, where are we and how do we get this done in terms of working with the city staff? We don't have a mechanism in place right now, and we haven't had a specific discussion with the finance director or city manager or anybody in that zone as to how we're going to move this forward. But when I'm thinking at our very next meeting, we really need to have somebody present who can address how we're going to move forward on that. Because reading between the lines, it sounded as if there were some open issues as to how we're going to work with the staff on that. And so I think we need to really address that at our next meeting.
So there's several details in response to that. First of all, there will have to be somebody in the finance department that receives not only the information from the vendor, but also the information from the FAC and any other comments. That's typically under the budget manager. I think if you talk to Jake, he would tell you that he could use more staff now anyway. But a project officer, I don't think is particularly onerous. The other thing that Jake and I have talked about, though, is somebody on staff that has the capability to interpret the economic data. And again, former Director Dickinson can speak to this better than me. You can't allocate staff until you have the authority and the job to do. So the staffing issue at best case will come up this fall when we start, or next fall when we start to develop the fiscal 27 budget, and that there will have to be analysis by the administration of what burden this puts on the finance department to get this outside help, and what kinds of staffing impact. Staffing is always a concern, and I know in speaking over the years with Jody and also now with Brittany, there's going to be some staffing increase requests that'll be coming to the fiscal 27 budget. Again, those are things that can get sorted out once we have the authority to do this.
Yeah, I'll echo that. The first step is having the authority, and everything else flows from that.
Other comments, questions?
Alderman Arnett, are there any concerns from the other alder men and women about the contents of this bill, or things that need to be addressed before it's finalized?
Yeah, I will be frank. The other economist on the city council is Alderman Harry Huntley, and we have been discussing it. And his concern is the juice worth the squeeze? And my response is, I fervently believe that it is. I cannot see any way that having this information as part of our budgeting consideration could be harmful, but we don't know what the cost is going to be. Now, if this was to be, say, $150,000 a year plus a full-time equivalent staff, yeah, I'd have some concerns myself about that. But I'd say that Harry and I have had some conversations. I think in principle he agrees with the idea, but the devil is in the details. And it will be going to the Finance Committee if it hasn't already. Vicky, I don't know if Finance has taken this up. They had to wait until we had the public hearing, and that was at the June 9th. No, it was in May that we had the public hearing on this. No one spoke, but you
There's-
have, before it goes to council committees, you have to have a public hearing.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of discussion. The question of the timing did come up. There's kind of two timeframes that are listed within the legislation, and what is covered under which timeframe was part of that discussion. So there's an explicit October 1 date that's listed, but the main report is listed as being due by the time the mayor's budget is released, which isn't soon enough for that to be right. Then that was what I had written in the staff report, was having that no later than January helps feed into the decision-making process. Obviously earlier is better, but that's sort of, from my perspective, we would at least need it by then. So there was some discussion of which of those timeframes apply. So yes, some discussion, but that's obviously not through all of the committee process. So
Well, both of those items are on page 2 of the legislation. Reports required, and the budget levels has the October date, but when you go down to 2B, it does talk about in time to be involved in the mayor's budget. So those are things that can get clarified before the second reader. Those are also things that can get clarified with amendments once we have some experience under our belt.
Yep.
Other comments, questions?
Fred,
Yes.
a question for city management. Would it be possible to at least get the RFP process drafted in the interim, knowing that the legislation is forthcoming? Is it appropriate to at least get an RFP drafted, not posted, but drafted?
There's no prohibition on planning ahead, right? You are correct, right? The thing you can't do is actually put that on the street. The one caution that I will have there, just to set expectations, is that the city obviously does have a lot going on. So in terms of just the procurement office's priorities, right? Like, that's a discussion, I think, sort of internal to us we can have. We probably wouldn't even send that to the procurement office, though, because they are plowing through a bunch of stuff that's got deadlines that we need them to be working on. But I think in terms of our own planning ahead and drafting of, what would that look like, I don't think there's any prohibition on that. The one other caution I will have, generally speaking, my expectation is that, especially if you're talking with outside entities, we're free to do that up until the time that our pen hits the paper and we actually start writing something. And so if you're still in information gathering mode, I would encourage us to not start actually drafting a statement of work, solicitation materials. But once we feel like we've gotten that point, just because it's nice to have a little bit of cleanliness in the break between the information gathering and the writing.
So if I could interject, I actually was going to suggest, if this gets passed, that we go out with an RFI. I mean, it would really be nice to go out and see who's out there and who's interested and what kinds of services. And I'm seeing two different kinds of service requests here. One is the actual forecasting, but the other is to the extent that the fact identifies the need for supplemental help in identifying these. And I'm not sure, I mean, Ed, you've looked at this a little bit. You've seen what the county gets and the state gets. I wouldn't feel terribly uncomfortable about doing my own analysis of that, but that's me. The fact members may say, no, we need to know how to interpret this. As Joe said, you usually get a high end, a low end, and a middle, and you tend to go with the middle. Working in the office of the actuary for Medicare and Medicaid, I know exactly how those boundaries go, the confidence intervals, if you will. And that kind of leaves you, well, where do we think we're really going to be? And that is something that I think the fact may say, well, let's find out what somebody else thinks about where it's really going to be. Or even if there's 5 different forecasts, which one we think with the value added from the fact is a more likely scenario. So, this is still very formative, but we haven't even set up where the starting line is, and this legislation sets the starting line.
Comments?
So another question from me, Alderman Arnett. Does the FAC have a copy of the report that was drafted for the state and the county? I don't think I've seen it. I'd love to have an opportunity to review it myself, just to see, the depth, breadth of what they're putting together.
So, Ed, you can correct me on this. I think there are some proprietary concerns there. I have a copy of the one that the last one that the county received, but there are, I mean, I don't know. We'd have to have the Office of Law or Jody, do you know anything about this, or Vicky? I do have it, but it is proprietary. So, and Ed, I don't know.
Yeah, the county said that they're happy for us to share it with the FAC members. There's the report from Resi, and then there is the Spending Affordability Committee's report that takes that information and digests it and then applies it to the county and their recommendations. The Spending Affordability report is public information. You can get that on the county's website. We did send that to the FAC, but I don't know if it was before your time. And then there is the report that Resi gives them, which is the one that they felt they could share with, we could share it with the FAC, but it should not be widely distributed beyond the FAC.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
We have that, and I do believe we sent it at one point in time. I could be wrong, but it was a few months ago, so it may have been before your tenure.
I don't recall it, Jody. I'm not saying you're
Fair.
wrong.
No, I mean, it could have been we didn't distribute that. We did get the information that we could distribute it. But I don't know that it went out in an email, so that'll have to check on.
Either Vicky, Jackie, or somebody else, could you please arrange to provide these to the FAC? So
Yeah,
that we can have it in our base of information.
Yeah, we can make sure you get copies.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Fred, I wanted to sort of call in fire on myself. One of the comments that you had, I think this has to do, I'm looking on page 3 where I see it one time, but my sense of this legislation, and as the policymaker that wants it, that this is information that will be going to the FAC, to the city manager, to the city council, and the mayor. The mayor is a member of the city council. So I have in the legislation, it's on page 3 at the top, at least in one place, that the recipients of the reports will be the city manager, the finance director, the mayor, and the city council. I don't think there's any reason to hold back information as it comes in, and everybody can start looking at it. The facts report will come when the fact finishes its analysis. But you had twice in the comments you'd sent to me had said it should be the mayor. I think it needs to be a broader audience, and that's why I've left that in on page 3 of the legislation. It might be elsewhere too. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've looked at this, but I did want to respond to you that I did take it under consideration, but I am intentionally wanting it to be a broader audience.
I appreciate that. Any other comments, questions? Let me ask.
Just a quick observation that, I just sent to Fred by email. I went online and grabbed the county spending affordability committee report, because it is easily available. They did one the end of January, so that can be distributed, but that's the public version. That's the report of the county's commission itself.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks.
All right, let me ask you, any other comments or questions from the commission members? Hearing none. So, commission members, are we in a position collectively to take a position on 25-12?
Has it come out of finance committee,
No,
Jody?
No.
So if it's still in finance committee, I would like to see the draft that comes out of finance committee.
Well, what we have before as first reader is what was referred to us. So that's fine, we can hold off, but I don't know the timing, the expectation for when our comments and review are anticipated to be received. Jody, do you know, or Vicky, do you know?
Generally, my experience has been that the committees like to have the input of groups like the FAC for them to consider. So since most of the amendments to legislation come out of committees, or certainly are voted on by committees. Jody and Ross might have a different answer. I would encourage you to not wait until they're done, basically.
Jody, any further comment on that?
Yeah, I wanted to point out that you talked a little bit about the deadlines today, but one thing that I think is important, and I agree with Vicky, the finance committee is going to want your input before they take final action on it, is that the staff report talks about some concerns about the specificity of what is required in the economic analysis, and thought it might be better to be general, and then as the work is done, decided what the FAC and whoever is doing that effort on the FAC's behalf decide how to focus the economic analysis per se, so that you would have some flexibility on what factors you're looking at from an economic standpoint. And I think that that's something the FAC is going to want to comment on, because you're the one that's going to be doing the work.
I guess the question is, do we have enough information at our disposal now, and enough base of knowledge to be able to make that judgment as to what should be included?
Well, that in some sense that was the point that I was trying to make in the staff report, is that circumstances change, right? The factors that you look at today might be different than the factors you would have looked at, if we were in a 2008, kind of situation, and that locking you into particular data points might not be where you want to end up. What you might want to talk about instead is we should be looking at data related to these areas And then depending upon the circumstances, you would have some flexibility to change the particular data points you're looking at as needs arise. But that what you might want to specify is we should be looking at this particular range of topics. Obviously, the end of the day, that's a call for council to make. But you guys might, probably do have an opinion about how locked in you want to be to particular data points. And I'm
So-
sorry, our Alderman Arnett has I feel like I keep talking over him.
No, that's fine. Look, I saw those comments, and first of all, we're on page 4 of the legislation, and what it says is the commission shall consider, and so it gives you a laundry list. I think these are very important things to consider. And in terms of reporting, let's say debt service obligations is one of the things you could consider under B1. In your report, you can say, we had no particular value added on that particular expectation. And this almost, B1 almost sets up the outline for the report. Again, this is something that you could consider if you don't have the information to consider it, or you don't think that it's worthy of consideration. I don't see you as being locked in. But I will say, and this is a more general frustration, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact, but what tends to happen is, and we had a movement a few years ago to take a lot of things out of code and put it into rules and regulations. And I was the author of that legislation. And what tends to happen is it comes out of code and goes nowhere. And I don't want to see this go nowhere. This is me as a policymaker. 4 other members of the council agree with me on that. But I think it's particularly in this initial effort, it's very important to be more descriptive. I could have put in even more items here, but I wanted to get across the general notion of the expectation of the reporting from the staff, the analysis, and then the reporting. And I really resist the notion of making this more general and therefore could float around and not really get at some important issues. Now, I agree the staff, the fact, and the council members and the committees can be saying, we don't think we want to hear from the staff on expenditures for the general and enterprise funds. That's being done by somebody else. Actually, that is something the fact has always reported on. And in many ways, this is an elaboration of many things the fact has been doing since its inception. So it's not really limiting to the economic forecasts. These are things the fact does with regularity. But the value added is marrying these things that the fact opines on regularly with an economic forecast that says, we're looking at the expenditures for the enterprise funds, and we don't think that there's going to be the environment for that. Or we think that the cost of chemicals for the water treatment plant are really going to go up because of tariffs, according to this thing. And so we're not sure that you really allocate. Now I'm getting into a very micro level example, and I don't expect that of the fact. But the point is, a lot of these things that are in this list are things the fact does anyway. But what it's attempting to do here is marry that to whatever the value added is from the forecasts.
Okay, other comments?
Yeah,
Jim?
Fred, thanks. I will defer to the practicing and non-practicing attorneys on the fact, but it seems to be there's a slight subtle difference in language with regards to collective bargaining in terms of the responsibilities of the fact in the prior legislation and the proposed amended. If I go to page 2, I'm looking at you, Ed. On page 2, the prior charter said review of collective bargaining agreements prior to execution, and the new legislation says make recommendations on the impact of collective bargaining agreements on city finances and must be provided to the council before it votes on the agreements. And again, I defer to the practicing and non-practicing attorneys. Are we okay with that change in language?
I don't think it's an either or, Jim. I will have to go back to make sure we're not striking out. This is a bone of contention, has been for years. And
Yes.
really, as one of the people who, with Dick Israel, formed the fact, the council has always been frustrated that we really have no input into the union negotiations whatsoever. It's presented to us as a take it or leave it. If we don't accept the contract as negotiated by the administration, our answer is no, go back to the bargaining table. And the notion when the fact was conceived is that you could have sworn to all of the secrecy and confidentiality issues, a member of the fact or whatever, be part of that negotiating process. Sheila Finlayson and I were part of an interest-based bargaining union negotiation process back in 2014, I believe it was. And I feel we had a very, first of all, it was an educational experience for me, not Sheila, because she's always been involved in union things. But I think it was very impactful on us, and we had an impact on the process. However, I recommended that we not do that again with council members, because we're in effect, two council members are sort of ratifying the union negotiation contract without any input from any of the other council members. Having the fact involved in advising and listening to and participating in union negotiations, to me, solves that problem. So, Jim, I no way hope, and I would certainly welcome any recommendation if you think this is rewriting that to take the fact out of that. However, the problem has been the administration, every administration, not just this administration, have been very wary of letting the fact in that process. And I'm very frustrated by that. I think it's wrong-minded, but I'm only one of 9 votes. So, and I know that Alderwoman Finlayson agrees with me on this particular point, because we did have that one-time only exposure to being involved in the union negotiation process, which, by the way, was a really excellent process and an excellent outcome. It's too bad that the council can't be involved writ large, but I understand why. It's too many potential briefs and confidentiality on a very sensitive issue. But if Joe Rubino were the fact member that was stipulated to be a ad
Collective
hoc
bargain.
official in the collective bargaining, and of course, if Joe had the time or Ed had the time, and they are long and involved day long for weeks after weeks, I think that would be a very good thing. And the fact, I've always thought of the fact as sort of the paternal advisors to the city council family on these issues. You're there to help us and take deep dives into things and to give us a broader perspective. None of us come to the city council with very much qualification on the broad-based $200 million a year enterprise that is the city government. And so we need these outside, not just the fact, but all the boards and commissions to broaden our perspective and give us a depth of view and a richness of perspective that we can't bring ourselves. And that's why we have so many boards and commissions.
Thanks. All I'm saying is the wording changed. Are we comfortable with the wording?
Can you, I will, Jim, if you have I'm trying to find where it's in black. So
if you go to page 2,
I'm on page 2.
The first section is the strikeout language, which was the prior code. And then the new duty is under 248.1110B1B.
Right.
Yeah, my
Right.
sense of that is, I think that's in the ordinance legislation now.
Yeah, if it's
The
in,
underline is the new.
no, if it's in black, it is carryover from existing code. So the red is new code, the black. So the language that's up in the strikeout in black
Right.
that's carried down into B1B, small b,
Yes.
is out of what's stricken. So it is staying in code exactly the same word. It's just in a new location.
Okay. Thanks. That's why I was,
Good.
it looked like the language was changing.
You scared me. I didn't want that to change. So yeah, no, it's staying.
The codification is changing, but the text, I don't think is changing.
Okay, thanks.
If I
I'm
could
done.
just make the quick comment, the more substantive issue, well, first, I do appreciate, Jim, you're focusing on the language, that's important. But to me, the more substantive issue is what Ross was getting into, is what is the role the fact plays? And it has been a subject of much discussion. And I know I've been open in my own opinion that it's there's very little that we can do of value given the way that it is currently set up, that we, like the council, get involved in this basically after it's done. And that really clips how we can be of assistance. So I think we should have a broader role. But that's a subject that I guess will require some ongoing discussion.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments or questions?
Joe has his hand up.
Did I hear a yes
Yeah.
or no?
I just had one clarification. I don't mean to back up, but this is more a legislator question for Ross, I think. I don't have the corporate knowledge on it, but when you went back to talking about the report and research and the staff comments about whether you want to change any of the specifics, I took that to be looking at on page 4 of the legislation. I took that to be looking at B2, and it's pretty directive language and very specific on the items. Now, the items are good. I took the question just to be whether you want to build in any flexibility to change that list down the road. And the list is good. I don't have the corporate knowledge. I think it's probably more of a legislator question, but we were kind of talking about B1, but I kind of took the question really as looking at B2 list.
Yeah. So look, I hope you understand that I see the fact as the good guys and the help with the council. And I in no way want to feel like you're being put in irons. But the way I view this is under 2, let's just take 2A, growth and stability of the local economy. That is the whole point of the economic forecast. And I would think that the fact can say some very simple things there or much more detailed things. I think the fact could say that the economic forecasts seem reasonably to bound the stability of the local economy. And so we're just passing that on. Or we could say, I think that the report doesn't consider the unique circumstances that are going to be brought on by the full implementation of the city dock, which is going to have an impact on our local economy. Those are very temporal things. They'll come and go, but I think these are items to be a list of things for the fact to comment on. The comment can be very simply no comment or no value added. Just go look at the forecast. So again, my intention is not to do this onerous overlord kind of thing of locking you in. It is to be suggestive of things. And I think that many of these things are things that the fact has considered over time. What you haven't had, let's go down to the 2G, the annual inflation for the year and trends in inflation. This, to me, really speaks to a point that Jim continues to bring up, which is, right now inflation is low, but because of the impacts of such and such from the economic forecast, we really ought to be looking at the out years for the impact on our capital expenditures. the cost of inputs for capital expenditures are really going to be driven by inflation. I mean, these are things as a practicing economist and person who forecasts national healthcare expenditures, we would look at all of these things when we were doing our forecast. And those were done, then we published them, but also were given to the Treasury Department. So they had to be fairly rigorous. This, again, is presented in the context of a new information source that the FACT has available to it and the city to dig into these things in a little more detail. But if there's no new information, there's, the reporting requirement would be, trends in commercial housing, H. You could say there's anticipated from the comprehensive plan that there will be increased housing developed along the major traffic corridors of Forest Drive, West Street, et cetera, and that the economic forecast is saying that inputs for housing, because we're not importing lumber from Canada, are likely to go up. And so the budgeteers should be mindful of that. Again, this is the richness of bringing in economic forecasting to the budget process. And it is meant to be a help, not a burden. If it's not helpful, let's not do it. It's as simple as that. But, and I've often thought that after I'm out of the saddle, I will still want to continue to come to FACT meetings, and particularly to guide this one along. And I'm actually hereby volunteering to do that if there's value added. But I think this could really, really add a richness of analysis that would be beneficial across the board, beneficial to the budget making, beneficial to the city council. This would be beneficial in our whole discussion of affordable housing, where I don't think there's a really realistic understanding of markets by many of my colleagues on the council. And so I'm really thinking that once we procure these services, it's going to be applied in a lot of different venues, not just the budget, but that's my hope. I think that this is something that could be very rich and very rewarding, or could just be another report that sits on a shelf like I have above me here, including the blue ribbon report by the FACT Commission before it was a commission.
Thank
Anyway.
you, Alderman.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're at a point where we need to make a decision as a group. My suggestion is that we prepare a relatively brief draft report endorsing the legislation, subject to some concerns and reservations, which we would spell out. That I'll be happy to take a crack at draft of the report and then circulate it to commission members for review and comment, revisions, editing, etc. And hopefully, in a not too distant future, we can come up with something that we all can live with. Anybody have any other thoughts or comments? Are those questions or are those thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Anybody else? Thoughts, questions, comments? All right. We'll take that as a consensus and move forward. I will try and get you all a draft report by the end of the weekend. So today's Thursday. Sounds like a good Sunday morning project. And ask for relatively quick turnaround from commission members so we can provide something to the mayor and council in a timely manner. again, let me look one more time. Any objection to that proposed course of action? Seeing none, Frank, I can't see you giving me a thumbs up.
Yes, I'm on board. Everything's good.
Okay, I think everybody else, other commission members, just give me a thumbs up so I know you're on record. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah, we're good.
Okay. Let the record reflect that commission members by consensus have endorsed the proposed course of action that I've outlined. So before we move on, briefly, any final comments or questions on the spending affordability? Yes, no. Okay. Moving on very briefly.
Ed and in absentia, Bob Burden, for all of the work over all the years that they've done to help get this to the starting line. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact and the work it's done over the years.
Happy to work with the alderman and really appreciate your interest in moving this forward. I sent you all a copy of the debt affordability report from Davenport. I sent that the other day for your information. I understand that there may have been a few questions at the last meeting about that, or if not, there was some inquiry about whether we as a fact were going to be provided with the information. So we have it now. I don't know if anybody has had an opportunity to review it. If you have questions, Jody indicated to me that she could briefly and generally discuss it if we feel that's desirable or necessary. And also, we need to know whether we feel we want to have Davenport, ask staff to arrange with Davenport to perhaps come to our July meeting to make a fuller presentation. So with all that, let me open the floor for comments, questions. Jim, did I see you? Any comments?
Sorry, I was looking. Thank you for getting, the Davenport report to us. Let's see. I think Brittany mentioned that there's a potential new debt offering coming down in the fall, which would increase debt service in the current budget year. And I wanted to ask about so on the report, on the Davenport report, on the page titled Debt Service Policy Compliance, it indicates no new debt service in the FY26 year. But it does indicate new debt service in the FY27 year. Is that because we're probably going to secure the debt but not draw on it until FY27?
Correct. If we sell bonds in the fall or in the winter, our first interest payment would be in the following year. And as far as the general fund's concerned, we don't accrue interest due through the reporting period. We recognize the interest on debt when we have to pay it. So there will be no payment requirement for new debt in FY26.
Until 27. Thanks, Jody.
Correct. I am prepared to share the report if anybody has any detailed questions. I was just trying to do it just now, and I have to figure out how to share a tab because it's on one of my tabs. So
Gotcha.
I can figure,
The-
if you want me to, I can do that. Just let me know.
Would this involve the refinancing existing debt, or is it strictly new issuance only?
So right now, if you're talking about the planned issue in the fall, it's just considering issuance of new debt. I think at this point, we always, in the bond ordinance, we always ask for permission to refund any debt that we would need to. However, with interest rates the way they are, all of our old debt's been refunded where possible to take on lower interest rates for savings.
Right.
I'm not sure we only refund old debt if we think we're gonna have savings, and I
Right.
don't see that happening in this environment. But we always make sure the bond ordinance includes that authority. But that's a separate piece of legislation that's not so far accounted for in the FY '27 budget.
Thanks. Page 4 of the report has proposed borrowing, and it indicates that there's about just under 14 mil in prior approved but unissued.
Mhm.
So,
So for we've asked if you look at the FY '25 budget and prior budgets, there is capital projects that haven't moved forward as quickly.
Right.
And we only issue the debt when we think we need the cash to spend. And so there's a lot of unused authority that we have not issued bonds for. And so when we do these debt analyses on potential new debt, we take into account the fact that we will eventually want to issue the debt for that old authority as well. So that's worked into that calculation, and we ask Davenport to spread it across 26 and 27.
got it. Thank you, Jody.
Any other questions, Jim?
No,
Uh,
thanks.
Any
Uh,
questions?
I have a question
Yes,
for
sir.
Jody. Is there a statutory limit on what we can borrow as a percentage of expense or as a percentage of revenues?
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it a step. Like the state has a limit of sorts, but it's very high. Our policy is that we try to keep annual debt service 10% or less of total general fund expenses. But we absolutely, the ceiling that we do not exceed is 12%. And that if you look at that debt affordability report, there's a bar chart in there that shows you where we would anticipate we would be if we, not only with with our existing debt, but with the new debt on top of it, where that would end up if we project out with expenditures into the future years. And so as you can see, we're under 10%, or I think 1 year hits just a tiny bit over 10%. So I think we're in good shape as far as that analysis is concerned.
I was just wondering if like there was actually like a statutory cap
I
that
think the
we would be able
state,
to-
I'm not going to be able to tell you what they are, but the state has some caps that apply to local jurisdictions that we cannot exceed.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Let me ask fact members, would you feel that you would want to have more information or presentation on this, based upon your, subsequent review of the materials? Or, is what you've heard and seen sufficient for the time being? Yeah,
Not me.
Hey, I kind of had the same thoughts as Peter did. I'm just kind of curious. I'm not sure it needs to be a presentation or anything. I would be interested if you could point me towards like benchmarks for municipal debt service and things like that. I'm a little new to municipal finance. I'm just kind of curious what are the benchmarks? Is there kind of a rule of thumb, other municipalities? And I don't know that I need a pitch, but if you could point me somewhere, I started Googling online, snooping around a little bit, but I'm just kind of curious as the background behind it. Over.
I think that Davenport could probably provide more robust information on other municipalities. My experience with the county, their actual limit on as a percent of general fund expenditures is actually higher. When I was there initially, it was lower. It was, I don't know, 7%. Then they increased it to 8. Then they went, I don't know where it's at now. I can't say. I haven't been there in quite a few years. So they probably are in the same vicinity. I can't, they could be at 12, maybe a little higher. There's also some limits that limit you based on a percent of your accessible property base, but we don't come anywhere near that. So it's way too high. We could never afford it financially.
Is that some information that you would like us to try and get, Joe?
I'm sorry?
Is that some information that you'd like us to try to get for you?
I'll keep reading up, and I can kind of ask offline. Or
Well, and I'll send an email to our Davenport contacts and see if they have anything readily available.
That's great.
Okay, great, Judy. Thank you. All right, then I'll take it from our discussion that what we've heard today, along with the Davenport report, is sufficient information about debt capacity for the time being. It may be that we will feel at a later date that we want a more full presentation from Davenport, but I'm not going to try and arrange that unless there's some indication from the commission that that is what you would like. So, Jody?
A couple of points for the newer members. The analysis that we get from Davenport is very conservative in its projections on increases in general fund expenses and the interest rates. And I think Brittany had them increase their anticipated interest rate to make sure we were being super conservative. And the capital program, the analysis assumes we move forward with the capital program as planned, and it always is much slower than what you see in that anticipation. So again, very conservative. And I will have a caveat there that this was done before the budget was finalized. And I know in the final amendments, there were some changes to general fund expenses and possibly some additional bonds in the projects. But I can't remember the specifics on that, but I don't think it's going to move the analysis in any major way. But so the numbers are not quite final in that analysis.
Okay.
It's Jody. I have my first comment is, isn't it interesting that by 2050 we're no longer going to need any debt, thereby not incurring any debt service? And we know that's not necessarily the case. And I think it's just because I'm new to this role and new to the position, but like somehow I need to click in my mind how we look at anticipated need for capital spending and what that means for incurring future debt, so that I can kind of marry that up. And
we don't have many numbers that go out any further than the 6 years of the capital improvement plan. Is what the capital expense needs would be. And as you see, that drops off. That's only considering current projects. As you add projects in the out years, you get more and more debt added, and those bars just continue to move to the right. And
I think it's just my lack of familiarity with what the data is showing, and then of course it's the I would be interested in seeing some sort of, and this is not a tasking at all, but some sort of projection versus actual experience, especially when we're talking about like a 5-year capital plan, and knowing that there's always delays and underspend, and then delays and underspend, or like the lack of necessity for incurring all additional debt. I just need to kind of familiarize myself more as we go along, so I can kind of understand how that impacts what we budget versus what the city's actually going to experience.
Yeah, Jody, would it be fair to say that one way of reading that report is assuming, again, that we pursued every single project on the timeline as it appears in the CIP, which, as we just noted, is not always that fast. We've had issued all the debt and all that. One way of looking at that report, that chart, is if we did all of that, here's how long the commitment, here's what the length of time the city is committing to those projects to pay them off.
Yes, correct. That anticipates we move forward with all the projects the way they're currently programmed.
Yeah, so in some sense, it's a chart of the tail of the current commitment. Is that fair, Jody?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's things that change to the benefit when the projects move slower, but project costs go up over time as well. So the numbers move. The expenses related to the capital projects go up, and so do the needs for more bonds. So there's increases and decreases that you'll see over time. But this is the picture at this moment in time.
All right, thank you for that explanation. Let me ask the PAC members to, if you have any further questions that you'd like staff or perhaps Davenport, the financial advisor, to answer, send them to me and I'll make sure they get channeled to the right place. Okay?
Thank you. For
Any other questions on debt affordability for the time being? If not, I think the next meeting will be July 10th at 8 a.m. We're trying to have a presentation on the city's pension plans, retirement plans for that meeting. That hasn't been set up yet, but we're working to see if we can achieve it. If we can, that'll be an item on the July agenda. Any other comments or questions for the good of the order? Yes, Ed.
Mindful of the time, I just wanted to note Mr. Cardillo did a commendable job last time in your absence, and we, as everybody knows, sent a letter off after that. And I'm wondering whether we have gotten any response, comments, feedback, and perhaps that could be something that could be addressed at the next meeting, because obviously a lot of time and care was put into the letter, and just would be interested in seeing what, if any, response we might have to that.
Okay. Russ.
I can tell you I felt singed by it. But I think we do owe you a response.
No intention to singe, just to, be clear that we want to do our very best job, and so there are things that go with that.
Thank you, Ed.
Jim, did you have something?
No,
Okay. All right.
no, just to thank.
All right, so if nothing else for the good of the order, entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Jim Cardillo, seconded by, let me see, hands.
Peter.
I'll second.
Patrick beat y'all. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Nobody wants to stay around. All right, well, go have a great day. And again, Jim, thanks for your work last meeting. Really appreciated. And I will try and get you all a draft letter regarding the ordinance in the next couple of days.